Hey guys, this is Allison from Allykatkreations. How are you? Please give a thumbs up, a subscribe, a share. Just caring. If you get anything from my work, a connected dot, an epiphany, a mind blown moment, a mushroom cloud moment, a new book to read, a new author to explore, please consider supporting my work. Everything is at the bottom of the video. The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall, because I'm still working on the Hermit's Journey from his other book. Yes, it's a lengthy, really good story. So I'm trying super hard to get that finished and make it cohesive. So the last reading I did with Manly P. Hall from this very book, I had to omit a large portion of it because it was talking and invoking, invoking both. And I don't speak names and I don't speak that spell work into existence because I'm not manifesting any of that stuff. That's not what I'm here to do. So I hope everybody who watched that understood. And it seems like a lot of the comments were thus, thank you, because I don't want to listen to that and manifest it and think about it. And it comes in my world. Although I understand where Manly P. Hall was trying to convey what that all is. Remember, he has occult secrets. He's divulging, but again, just take what resonates from you. And my hair looks super blonde compared to the rest of my head. Very weird. Sorry, guys. So I didn't get to post last night for two reasons. I lost power, not long enough to hook up a generator, but it kept coming on and off. I had really bad storms in my area. And I was afraid the tree branch that is hanging on my neighbor's tree, it's just like dangling, was gonna fall, and I didn't need to have a heart attack doing a reading and hearing that noise and freaking out. So yeah, last night sucked. And the storm started around the same time I do my readings. Not fun at all. Thor was very angry last night in Northwest Indiana. Anywho, and for those of you who are interested, I have yet to hear from the 3 jobs I applied for. It's in the same school district. Didn't hear from them yet. I'm hoping by next week. Their school starts earlier here, where New York is like after Labor Day. Oh, not here. This month, next month. Well, August, this is almost over. Crunch time. So we're going to do the elements and their inhabitants. And let's see how close it gets to the Curtis's books when they're talking about the elements and other inhabitants. For the most comprehensive and lucid exposition of occult phenomenology, the branch of philosophy dealing with spiritual substances extant, mankind is indebted to Philippus Areolus Paracelsus. And I bet you I butchered that, so I do apologize. Prince of the alchemists and hermetic philosophers and true possessor of the royal secret, the philosopher's stone and the elixir of life. Paracelsus believed that each of the four primary elements known to the ancients, earth, fire, air, and water, consist of a subtle, vaporous principle and a gross corporeal substance. Air is therefore twofold in nature, tangible atmosphere and intangible volatile substratum, which may be termed spiritual air. Fire is visible and invisible, discernible and indiscernible, a spiritual ethereal flame manifesting through a material substantial flame. Carrying the analogy further, water consists of dense fluid and a potential essence of a fluidic nature. Earth, likewise, two essential parts, the lower being fixed, tremendous, immobile, the higher, rarefied, mobile, and virtual. The general term elements has been applied to the lower or physical phases of these four primary principles, and the name elemental essences to their corresponding indivisible spiritual constitutions. Minerals, plants, animals, and men live in a world composed of the gross side of these four elements, and from various combinations of them construct their living organism. Harry Drummond, in Natural Law in Spiritual World, describes the process as follows. If we analyze this material point at which all life starts, we shall find it to consist of a clear, structureless, jelly-like substance resembling albumin, or white of an egg. It is made of carbon, hydrogen, oxygen, and nitrogen. Its name is protoplasm. And it is not only the structural unit with which all living bodies start in life, but with which they are subsequently built up. Protoplasm, says Huxley, simple or nucleated, is the form basis of all life. It is the clay of the potter. The water element of the ancient philosophers have been metamorphosized into the hydrogen of modern science. The air has become oxygen, the fire nitrogen, the earth carbon. Just as visible nature is populated by an infinite number of living creatures, so according to Paracelsus, the invisible spiritual counterpart of visible nature, composed of tenuous principles of the visible elements, is inhabited by a host of peculiar beings, to whom he had given the name elementals, and which have later been termed the nature spirits. Goodness sakes, I'm sorry, guys. Paracelsus divided these people of the elements into four distinct groups, which he called gnomes: Undines, sylphs, and salamanders. I'm going to put a pause here because I'm going to go get a book and show you guys. Hang on. I found the book. There's another one I can't find. It's amongst the huge library I have. It still might be up in my upstairs. But The Unseen Forces by Manly P. Hall. This is a very short book, but it's really good. And a lot of this information is about what I'm about to read to you. So, but if you're interested in his work and you like this type of work by Manly P. Hall, I consider getting this one. It's really cheap. It's very thin. Unfortunately, it's copywritten to the point that you can't read it outright. Like some of his other works, some works you can read, but some works you can't. This is one you can't. But easy reading, insightful reading, and a lot of it is about the topic that we're covering in the secret teachings of all ages. But I wanted to get you, I wanted to show you this book because it's good. Very good. And it goes into also the Curtis's talk about the salamanders and the undines and the sylphs and all that fun. So we're picking off. He taught that they were really living entities, many resembling human beings in shape and inhabiting worlds of their own, unknown to man, because he undeveloped senses were incapable of functioning beyond the limitations of the grosser elements. Henceforth, insert my own opinion here, a lot of these entities and things exist between fourth and fifth density. So your human eyes in third density cannot see unless they shift their vibration down a notch so that you can see them. Some people can see them because they already have the 4D sight, but many of us do not. I go back and forth in that sight. I don't always see because I have to tap in. But some people naturally can just see these things. The civilizations of Greece, Rome, Egypt, China, and India believed implicably in satyrs, sprites, and goblins. They peopled the sea with mermaids, the rivers and fountains with nymphs, the air with fairies, the fire with lars and pennants, and the earth with fauns and dryads, and hamadryads, never heard of that. These nature spirits were held in the highest esteem and propriety. Offerings were made to them, occasionally as a result of atmospheric conditions or peculiar sensitiveness of the devotee. They became visible. Many authors wrote concerning them in terms which signify that they had actually beheld these inhabitants of nature's finer realms. A number of authorities are of the opinion that many of the gods worshipped by the pagans were elementals, for some of these invisibles were believed to be of commanding stature and magnificent deportment. The Greeks gave the name demon to some of these elementals, especially those of the higher orders, and worshipped them. Probably the most famous of these demons is the mysterious spirit which instructed Socrates, and whom that great philosopher spoke of the highest terms. Fun. Those who devoted much study to the invisible constitution of man realized that in quite probable the demon of Socrates, an angel of Jacob and Boaz, were in reality not elementals, but the overshadowing divine natures of these philosophers themselves. In his note to Apuleius on the god of Socrates, Thomas Taylor says, as the demon of Socrates, therefore, was doubtless one of the highest order, as many be inferred from the intellectual superiority of Socrates to most other men. Apuleius is justified in calling this demon a god, and that the demon of Socrates indeed was divine is evident from the testimony of Socrates himself in the first, I always slaughter this term, Alcubiat, blah, blah, blah. Hang on. Alcibiades. Close, I almost had it. Here.
Alcibiades.
Always butcher that. Always. Always. It pisses me off. For in the course of the dialogue, he clearly says, I have long been of the opinion that the god did not as yet direct me to hold any conversation with you. And in the apology, he most unequivocally evinces that this demon is allotted a divine transcendency, considered as ranking in the order of demons. The idea once held that the invisible elements surrounding and interpenetrating the earth were peopled with living, intelligent beings may seem ridiculous to the prosaic mind of today. This doctrine, however, has found favor with some of the greatest intellects of the world. The sylphs of Focus Cardin, the philosopher of Milan, the salamander seen by Benvenuto Cellini, the Pan of Saint Anthony, and Le Petit Homme Rogue, the Little Red Man or Gnome of Napoleon Bonaparte, have found their places in the pages of history. Literature has also penetrated the concept of nature spirits. The mischievous Puck of Shakespeare, Midsummer's Night's Dream, the elementals of Alexander Pope's Rosicrucian poem, the Rape of the Lock, the mysterious creatures of Lloyd Linton's Zanoni, James Barr's Immortal Tinkerbell, and the famous bowlers that Rip Van Winkle encountered in the Catskill Mountains are well-known characters to students of literature. The folklore and mythology of all peoples abound in legends concerning these mysterious little figures who haunt old castles, guard treasures in the depths of the earth, and build their homes under the spreading protection of toadstools. Fairies are the delight of childhood, and most children give them up with reluctance. Not so very long ago, the greatest minds of the world believed in the existence of fairies, and it is still an open question as to whether Plato, Socrates, and Umbilicus were wrong when they avowed their reality. For those of you, I have fairy guides, spirit guides. I have a lot of elemental guides. A lot. Including the fae. Can't be guides if they ain't real, they're real. Horsilius, when describing the substance when constitute the bodies of the elementals, divided flesh into two kinds. The first being that which he have all inherited through Adam. This is the visible corporeal flesh. The second was the flesh which had not descended from Adam, and being more attenuated, with not subject to the limitations of the former. The bodies of the elementals were composed of the transubstantial flesh. Proclius stated that there is as much difference between the bodies of man and the bodies of nature spirits as there is between matter and spirit. Yet he adds, the elementals are not spirits because they have flesh, blood, and bones. They live and propagate offspring. They eat and talk and act and sleep, etc. And consequently, they cannot be properly called spirits. They are beings occupying a place between men and spirits, resembling men and spirits, resembling men and women in their organization and form, and resembling spirits in rapidity of their locomotion. Later, the same author calls these creatures composita, inasmuch as the substance out of which they are composed seems to be composite of spirit and matter. He uses color to explain the idea. Thus, the mixture of blue and red gives purple, a new color resembling neither of the others, yet composed of both. Such is the case with the nature spirits. They resemble neither spiritual creatures nor material beings, yet are composed of the substance which we may call spiritual matter or ether. Horsilius further adds that whereas man is composed of several natures, spirit, soul, mind, and body, combined in one unit, the elemental has but one principle, the ether out of which it is composed and in which it lives. The reader must remember that ether is meant the spiritual essence of one of the four elements. There are as many ethers as there are elements, and as many distinct families of nature spirits as there are ethers. These families are completely isolated in their own ether and have no intercourse with the denizens of the other ethers. But as man has within his own nature centers of consciousness sensitive to the impulses of all the four ethers, it is possible for any of the elemental kingdoms to communicate with him under proper conditions. The nature spirits cannot be destroyed by the grosser elements such as material, fire, earth, air, or water, for they function in a rate of vibration higher than that of earthly substances. Being composed of only one element or principle, the ether in which they function, they have no immortal spirit, and at death merely disintegrate back into the element from which they were originally individualized. no individual consciousness is preserved after death, for there is no superior vehicle present to contain it. Being made of but one substance, there is no friction between vehicles. Thus, there is little wear or tear incurred by their bodily functions, and they therefore live to a great age. Those composed of earth ether are the shortest lived, those composed of air ether the longest. The average length of life between 300 and 1,000 years. Porcelius maintained that they live in conditions similar to our earth environments and are somewhat subject to disease. These creatures are thought to be incapable of spiritual development, but most of them are of a high moral character. Concerning the elemental ethers in which the nature spirits exist, Porcelius wrote, they live in the four elements, the nymph in the element of water, the sylphs in the air, the pygmies in the earth, and the salamanders in the fire. There are also called Undine, Sylvestres, Gnome, and Vulcani. Each species moves only in the element to which it belongs, and neither of them can go out of its appropriated element, which is to them as the air is to us, or the water to the fish. And none of them can live in the element belonging to another class. To each elemental being, the element in which it lives is transparent, invisible, and respirable, as the atmosphere is to ourselves. The reader should be careful not to confuse the nature spirits with the true life waves evolving through the invisible worlds. While the elementals are composed of only one etheric or atomic essence, the angels, archangels, and other superior transcendental entities have composite organisms consisting of spiritual nature and a chain of vehicles to express that nature, not unlike those of man who have, but not including the physical body with its attenuated limitations. To the philosophy of nature spirits is generally attributed to Eastern origin, probably Brahmanic, and Porcelius secured his knowledge of them from the Oriental sages, with whom he came into contact during his lifetime of philosophical wanderings. The Egyptians and Greeks gleaned their information from the same sources. The four main divisions of nature spirits must now be considered separately. According to the teachings of Porcelius and the Abbé de Villars, and such scanty writings of other authors are available. What do you believe? Have you encountered any of these elemental spirits, sprites, undines, fairies? Have you seen them? I would love to know. Make a comment. The gnomes. The elementals who dwell in that attenuated body of the earth, which is called the terrorous ether, or grouped together under the general heading of gnomes. The name is probably derived from the Greek gnomios, meaning earth dweller. Again, I don't speak other languages very frequently or well. Spanish probably is my best. Just as there are many types of human beings invoking through the objective physical elements of nature, so there are many types of gnomes evolving through the subjugative ethereal body of nature. These earth spirits work in an element so close in vibratory rate to the material earth that they have immense power over its rocks and flora, and also over the mineral elements in the animal and human kingdoms. Some, like the pygmies, work with the stones, gems, and metals, and are supposed to be the guardians of hidden treasures. They live in caves far down in what the Scandinavians called the land of Nibelung. I can get this. I butcher it even when I read the others, my Norse stuff. Nibelungen. In Wagner's wonderful opera cycle, The Ring of the Nibelungen, Alberic makes himself king of the pygmies and forces these little creatures to gather for him the treasures concealed beneath the surface of the earth. Beside the pygmies, there are other gnomes who are called tree and forest sprites. To these groups belong to the sylvestries, satyrs, pans, dryads, hamadads, durdalis, elves, brownies, and little old men of the woods. Parsilius states that the gnomes build houses of substances resembling in their constitutionaries alabaster, marble, and cement, but the true nature of these materials is unknown, having no counterpart in physical nature. Some families of gnomes gather in communities, while others are indigenous to the substances which they work. For example, the hamadryads live and die with the plants or trees of which they are a part. Every shrub or flower is said to have its own nature spirit, which often uses the physical body of the plant as a habitation. The ancient philosophers, recognizing the principle of intelligence manifesting itself in every department of nature alike, believe that the quality of natural selection exhibited by creatures not possessing organized mentalities express in reality the decisions of nature spirits themselves. C.M. Gailey in the classic myth says, it was a pleasing trait in the old paganism that it loved to trace in every operation of nature the agency of deity. The imagination of the Greeks peopled the regions of earth and sea with divinities to whose agencies it attributed the phenomena that our philosophy ascribes to the operation of natural law. Thus, in behalf of the plant it worked with, the elemental accepted and rejected food elements, deposited coloring matter therein, preserved and protected the seed, and performed many other beneficent offices. Each species was served by a different but appropriate type of nature spirit. Those working with poisonous shrubs, for example, were offensive in their appearance. It is said that the nature spirits of poison hemlock resemble closely tiny human skeletons, thinly covered with a semi-transparent flesh. They live in and through the hemlock, and it can be cut down, remain with the broken shoots until both die. But while there is the slightest evidence of life in the shrub, it shows the presence of an elemental guardian. Great trees also have their nature spirits, but there is much larger than the elementals of smaller plants. The labors of the pygmies include the cutting of the crystals in the rocks and the development of veins of ore. When the gnomes are laboring with animals or human beings, their work is confined to the tissues corresponding with their own natures. Hence, they work with the bones, which belong to the mineral kingdom, and the ancients believed the reconstruction of broken members to be impossible without the cooperation of elementals. The gnomes are of various sizes, most of them much smaller than human beings, though some of them have the power of changing their stature at will. This is the result of extreme mobility of the element in which they function. Concerning them, Abbé de Villars wrote, the earth is filled with nigh to its center with gnomes, people of slight stature, who are the guardians of treasures, minerals, and precious stones. They are ingenious friends of man and easy to govern. Not all authorities agree concerning the amiable disposition of the gnomes. Many state that they are of a tricky and malicious nature, difficult to manage and treacherous. Writers agree, however, that when their confidence is won, they are faithful and true. The philosophers and initiates of the ancient world were instructed concerning these mysteries and these mysterious little people, and were taught how to communicate with them and gain their cooperation in undertakings of importance. The Magi were always warned, however, never to betray the trust of the elementals, for if they did, the invisible creatures working through the subjugative nature of man could cause them endless sorrow and probably ultimate destruction. So long as the mystic severed others and served others, the gnomes would serve him, but if he sought to use their aid selfishly to gain temporal power, They would turn upon him with unrelenting fury. The same was true if he sought to deceive them. The earth spirits meet at a certain time of the year to great conclaves as sorry guys, my teeth are falling out. Shakespeare suggested in his Midsummer's Night's Dream, where the elementals all gather to rejoice in the beauty and harmony of nature and the prospects of an excellent harvest. The gnomes are ruled over by a king whom they greatly love and revere. His name is Gob. Hence, subjects are often called goblins. Medieval mystics gave a corner of creation one of the cardinal points to each of the four kingdoms of nature spirits, and because their earthly character, the gnomes were assigned to the north, the place recognized by the ancients as a source of darkness and death. One of the four main divisions of human disposition was also assigned to the gnomes, and because so many of them dwelt in the darkness of caves and the gloom of the forest, their temperament was said to be melodically gloomy and despondent. By that, it is not meant that they themselves are of such disposition, but rather that they have special control over elements of similar consistency. The gnomes marry and have families, and the female gnomes are called nomides. Some wear clothing woven of element in which they live. In other instances, their garments are part of themselves and grow with them like the fur of an animal. The gnomes are also said to have insatiable appetites and spend a great part of the time eating, but they earn their food by diligent and conscientious labor. Most of them are of miserly temperature. Sorry, guys. Most of them are miserly temperament, fond of storing things away in secret places. There is an abundant evidence of the fact that small children often see the gnomes, inasmuch as their contact with the material side of nature is not yet completed, and they still function more or less consciously in the invisible worlds. According to Parsilius, man lives in the exterior elements, and the elementals lives in the interior elements. The latter have dwellings and clothing, manners and customs, languages and governments of their own. In the same sense as the bees have their queens and herds of animals have their leaders. Parsilius differs somewhat from the Greek mystics concerning the environmental limitations imposed on the nature spirits. The Swiss philosopher constitutes them as subtle, invisible ethers. According to this hypothesis, they would be visible only at certain times and only to those in rapport with their ethereal vibrations. The Greeks, on the other hand, apparently believed that many nature spirits had material constitutions capable of functioning in the physical world. And often the recollection of a dream is so vivid that upon waking, a person actually believes that he has passed through a physical experience. The difficulty of accurately judging as to the end of a physical sight and the beginning of an ethereal vision may account for these differences of opinion. Even the explanation, however, does not satisfactorily account for the satyr, which, according to St. Jerome, was captured alive during the reign of Constantine and exhibited to the people. It was of human form, that the horns and feet of a goat. After its death, it was preserved in salt and taken to the emperor that he might testify so its reality. It was within the bounds of probability that this curiosity was the modern science known as monstrosity. Possibly. The Undines. As the gnomes were limited in their function to the elements of earth, so the Undines, a name given to the family of water elements, function in the invisible spiritual essence called humid or liquid ether. In its vibratory rate, this is close to the element water, and so the Undines are able to control, to a great degree, the course and function of this fluid in nature. Beauty seems to be the keynote of the water spirits. Wherever we find them pictured in art or sculpture, they abound in symmetry and grace, controlling the water element, which has always been a feminine symbol. It is natural that the water spirits should most often be symbolized as female. There are many groups of Undines, some inhabited waterfalls, where they can be seen in the spray. Others are indigenous to swiftly moving rivers. Some have their habitat in dripping, oozing fens or marshes, while other groups dwell in clear mountain lakes. According to the philosophers of antiquity, every fountain had a nymph, every ocean wave its oceanide. The water spirits were known under such names as Oeridides, Nereides, Lemonides, Natidides, water sprites, sea maids, mermaids, and potomides. Often the water nymphs derived their name from the streams, lakes, or seas in which they dwelt. In describing them, the ancients agreed to certain salient features. In general, nearly all the Undines closely resembled human beings in appearance and size, though the ones inhabiting small streams and fountains were of correspondingly lesser proportions. It was believed that these water spirits were occasionally capable of assuming the appearance of normal human beings and actually associating with men and women. There are many legends about these spirits and their adoption by the families of fishermen, but in nearly every case, the Undines heard the call of the waters and returned to the realm of Neptune, the king of the sea. Little Mermaid. Practically nothing is known concerning the male Undines. The water spirits did not establish homes in the same way that the gnomes did, but live in coral caves under the ocean or among the reeds growing on the banks of rivers or the shores of lakes. Among the Celts, there is a legend to the effect that Ireland was peopled before the coming of the present inhabitants by a strange race of semi-divine creatures. With the coming of the modern Celts, they retired into the marshes and fens, where they remain even to this day. Diminutive Undines lived under lily pads and in little houses of moss sprayed by waterfalls. The Undines worked with the vital essence and liquids in plants, animals, and human beings, and were present in everything containing water. When seen, the Undines generally resembled the goddesses of Greek statuary. They rose from the water, draped in mist, and could not exist very long apart from it. There are many families of Undines, each with its peculiar limitations. It is impossible to consider them here in detail. Their ruler, Nexka, they love and honor and serve untiringly. Their temperament is said to be vital, and to them has been given as their throne the western corner of creation. They are rather emotional beings, friendly to human life, and fond of serving mankind. They are sometimes pictured riding on dolphins or great fish, and seem to have a special love of flowers and plants, which they serve almost as devotedly and intellectually as the gnomes. Ancient poets have said that the songs of the Undines were heard in the west wind, and their lives were consecrated in the beautifying of material earth. The Salamanders. The third group of elementals is the Salamanders, or spirits of fire, who live in the attenuated spiritual ether, which it is invisible fire element of nature. Without them, material fire cannot exist. A match cannot be struck, nor will flint and steel give off their spark without the assistance of a salamander, who immediately appears, so the medieval mystics believed, invoked by friction. Man is unable to communicate successfully with the salamanders owing to the fiery element in which they dwell, for everything is resolved to ashes that comes into their presence. By specially prepared compounds of herbs and perfumes, the philosophers of the ancient world manufactured many kinds of incense. When incense was burned, the vapors which arose were especially suitable as medium for the expression of these elementals, who, by borrowing the ethereal effluent, from the incense smoke, were able to make their presence felt. The salamanders are varied in grouping and arrangement as either the Undines or the gnomes. There are many families of them, differing in appearance, size, and dignity. Sometimes the salamanders were visible as small balls of light. Porcelius says salamanders have been seen in shapes of fiery balls or tongues of fire, running over the fields to appearing in homes. Medieval investigators of the natural spirits were of the opinion that the most common form of salamander was lizard-like in shape, a foot or more in length, invisible as a glowing or doula, twisting and crawling in the midst of the fire. Another group was described as a huge flaming giants in flowing robes, protected with sheets of fiery armor. Certain medieval authorities, among them the Abbé de Villars, held that Zoroaster was the son of Vesta, believed to have the wife of Noah, and the great salamander Oromasis. Hence, from that time onward, undying fires have been maintained until the Persian altars in honor of Zarathustra, flaming father. One most important subdivision of the salamanders were the Actinic. I can never get this word. Actinici. That's not coming out of my projection. These creatures appeared only as indistinct globes. They were supposed to float over water at night and occasionally to appear as forks of flame on the masts and rigging of ships, St. Elmo's fire. The salamanders were the strongest and most powerful of the elementals and had as their ruler a magnificent flaming spirit called Jinn. Terrible and awe-inspiring in appearance, the salamanders were dangerous and the sages were warned to keep away from them, as the benefits derived from studying them were often not commensurated with the price paid. As the ancients associated heat with the south, this corner of creation was assigned to the salamanders as their throne, and they exerted special influence over all beings of fury and tempestuous temperament. In both animals and men, the salamanders work through the emotional nature by means of body heat, the liver, and the bloodstream. Without their assistance, there would be no warmth. The sylphs. While the sages said that the fourth class of elementals, or sylphs, lived in the element of air, they meant by this not the natural atmosphere of the earth, but the invisible, intangible, spiritual medium of an ethereal substance similar to composition to our atmosphere, but more subtle. In the last discourse of Socrates, as preserved by Plato in his Phaedo, the condemned philosophers say, and upon the earth are animals and men, some in a middle region, others elementals dwelling about the air as we dwell among the sea, others in islands which the air flows round near the continent, and in a world the air is used by them as the water and the sea are by us, and the ether is to them what the air is to us. Moreover, the temperament of their seasons is such that they have no disease. Porcelius disputes this, and live much longer than we do, and have sight and hearing and smell, and all the other senses in far greater perfection, in the same degree that air is purer than water, or the ether than air. Also, they have temples and secret places in which the gods really dwelled, and they hear their voices and receive their answers, and are conscious of them, and hold converse with them. They see the sun, moon, and stars as they really are, and their other blessedness is of a piece with this. While the sylphs were believed to live among the clouds and in the surrounding air, their true home was on the tops of mountains. In his editorial notes in the occult sciences of Salverty, Anthony Todd Thompson says, the fays and the fairies are evidently of Scandinavian origin, although the name of fairy is supposed to be derived from, or rather is, a modification of the Persian prairie, or imaginary benevolent being, whose providence it was to guard men from the maledictions of evil spirits, but was more probability it may be referred to the Gothic fugger, as the term elves is from alpha, the general appellation from the whole tribe. If this derivation of the name of fairy be omitted, we may date the commencement of the popular belief in British fairies to the period of Danish conquest. They were supposed to be diminutive aerial beings, beautiful, lively, and beneficent in their intercourse with mortals, inhabiting a region called Fairyland or Alfheimr, commonly appearing on Earth at intervals. When they left traces of their visits in beautiful green rings, where the dewy sward had been trodden in their moonlight dances. To the sylphs, the ancients gave the labor of modeling the snowflakes and gathering clouds. This later they accomplished with the cooperation of the Undines, who supplied the moisture. The winds were their particular vehicle, and the ancients referred to them as the spirits of air. They are the highest of all the elementals, their native element being the highest in vibratory rate. They live hundreds of years, often obtaining to 1,000 years and never seeming to grow old. The leader of the sylphs is called Allyda, who is said to dwell on the highest mountain of the earth. The female sylphs were called sylphids. It is believed that the sylphs, salamanders, and nymphs had much to do with the oracles of the ancients, that in fact they were the ones who spoke from the depths of the earth and from air above. The sylphs sometimes assume human form, but apparently for only short periods of time. Their size varies, but in majority of cases, they are no larger than human beings and often considerably smaller. It is said that the sylphs has accepted human beings into their communities and have permitted them to live there for a considerable period. In fact, Priscillius wrote of such an incident, but of course it could not have occurred while the human stranger was in his physical body. But some, the muses of the Greeks, are believed to have been sylphs, for these spirits are said to gather around the mind of the dreamer, the poet, the artist, inspire him with their intimate knowledge of the beauties and workings of nature. To the sylphs were given the eastern corner of creation. Their temperament is mirthful, changeable, and eccentric. The peculiar qualities common to men of genius are supposedly the result of a cooperation of sylphs, who aid also beings with the sylphic inconsistency. The sylphs' labor was the gases of the human body and indirectly with the nervous system, where their inconsistency is again apparent. They have no fixed domicile, but wander from place to place, elemental nomads, invisible but ever-present powers in the intelligent activity of the universe. And if anybody researches Wicca, witchcraft, any of those pagan rites, so if you watch the movie The Craft all the way back in the 90s, they call the corners, they called the fixed points. They got witchcraft, Wicca, and all of that under that call the corners, which is the elementals, which they are represented in the movie. So if you watch the Craft movie, you'll see east being air, south being fire, west being water, north being earth. So go watch that little portion of the movie there on the beach, and I'll give you all the occulty symbolism of the ethereals and how people use those energies to call upon spirits or the Great Spirit or help themselves. Just saying. General observations. Certain of these ancients, differing with Priscillius, shared the opinion that the elemental kingdoms were capable of waging war upon one another, and they recognized in the battlings of the elements disagreements among these kingdoms of nature spirits. When lightning struck a rock and splintered it, they believed that the salamanders were attacking the gnomes. as they could not attack one another on the plane of their own peculiar etheric essences, owing to the fact that there was no vibratory correspondence between the four ethers of which these kingdoms are composed. They had to attack through a common denominator, namely the material substance of the physical universe, over which they had certain amount of power. Wars were also fought within the groups themselves. One army of gnomes would attack another army, and civil war would be rife among them. Philosophers of long ago solved the problems of nature's apparent inconsistencies by individualizing and personifying all its forces, crediting them with having temperaments not unlike the human, and then expecting them to exhibit typical human inconsistencies. The four fixed signs of the zodiac were assigned to the four kingdoms of elementals. The gnomes were said to be of the nature of Taurus, the Undines of the nature of Scorpio. The Salamanders exemplified the constitution of Leo, while the sylphs manipulated the emanations of Aquarius. The Christian church gathered all these elemental entities together under the title of demon. Daemon. This is a misnomer with far-reaching consequences. For the average mind, the word demon means an evil thing, and the nature spirits are essentially no more malevolent than they are the minerals, plants, and animals. Many of the early church fathers asserted that they had met and debated with these elementals. As already stated, the nature spirits are without hope of immortality, although some philosophers have maintained that in isolated cases, immortality was conferred upon them by the adepts and initiates who understood certain subtle principles of the invisible worlds. As disintegration takes place in the physical world, so it takes place in the ethereal counterpart of physical substance. Under normal conditions at death, a nature spirit is merely resolved back into the transparent primary essence from which it was originally individualized. I'm going to put a pause there. Under normal conditions of our physical avatar death, as we ascend and rise as a spirit, we're doing the same thing. It just takes us a shit ton longer to do. But eventually we do go back to our creator source, the all of all. Whatever evolutionary growth is made is recorded solely in the consciousness of that primary essence or element, and not in the temporally individualized entity of the elemental. Being without man's compound organism and lacking his spiritual and individual vehicles, the nature spirits are subhuman in their rational intelligence, but from their functions limited to one element has resulted a specialized type of intelligence far ahead of man in those lines of research peculiar to the element in which they exist. The terms incubus and succubus have been applied indiscriminately by the church fathers to elementals. The incubus and succubus, however, are evil, unnatural creations, whereas elementals is a collective term for all inhabitants of the four elemental essences. According to Parsilius, the incubus and succubus, which are male and female respectively, are parasitical creatures subsitting upon the evil thoughts and emotions of the astral body. These terms are also applied to the superphysical organisms of sorcerers and black magicians. While these larvae are in no sense imaginary beings, they are nevertheless the offspring of the imagination. By the ancient sages, they are recognized as the invisible cause of vice, because they hover in the ethers surrounding the morally weak and continually incite them to excess of degrading nature. Just a thought, my opinion. When you think of Satan, you think of demons, you think of these evil things, you are manifesting those thoughts. And if enough people start thinking Satan equals demon, Satan equals evil, just using that as an implied term, you're going to manifest a Satan. You're going to manifest a demon. You're manifesting these things. these little spirits are probably taking advantage of that and using thought form and thought transference. People who know how to manipulate these little guys are manipulating them through their negative thought streams into these little elementals. And those elementals are then attacking or doing tricking harm to an unknown person or an unaware human. Just my thought. For this reason, they frequent the atmosphere of the dope den, the dive, and the brothel, where they attach themselves to the unfortunates who have given themselves up to inequity. So people who are substance abusers, I could give a prime example. My birth mother was a substance abuser and she committed suicide. When my family recovered her body, they saw something coming out of the mattress. And these are Southern Baptists, don't believe in any of that kind of nonsense. These people are super wash your feet at the door and bathe yourself in the tub kind of deal in church. They don't believe in that stuff. They know Satan's real, but they don't believe in the specters and the spirit kind of things. And when they saw that coming out of the mattress, it gives a little incentive to say, please protect yourself if you're going to those places. Your aura, your toroidal field. No judgment. We all have vices and we all do things that are not socially acceptable, but just be cognizant that when you lower your frequency, other things can start playing devil on your shoulders. By permitting his senses to become deadened through the indulgence in habit-forming drugs or alcoholic stimulants, the individual becomes temporarily in rapport with these denzings of the astral plane. The Horus, seen by the hashish or opium addict, and the Lord monsters which torment the victim of delirium tremens, are examples of submundane beings visible only to those whose evil practices are the magnet for their attraction. Differing widely from the elementals and others, and also the incubus and succubus, is the vampire, which is defined by Persilius as the astral body of a person either living or dead, usually the latter state. The vampire seeks to prolong existence upon the physical plane by robbing the living of their vital energies and misappropriating such energies to its own ends. We have a lot of those. In his De Ente Spirituali, Persilius writes, those of these malignant beings, a healthy and pure person cannot become obsessed by them, because such larvae can only act upon men if the latter make room for them in their minds. A healthy mind is a castle that cannot be invaded without the will of its master. But if they are allowed to enter, they excite the passions of men and women. They create cravings in them. They produce bad thoughts, which act injuriously upon the brain. They sharpen the animal intellect and suffocate the moral sense. Evil spirits obsess only those human beings in whom the animal nature is predominating. Minds that are illuminated by the spirit of truth cannot be possessed. Only those who are habitually guided by their own lower impulses may become subjugated to their influences. And I know a plethora of people who have attachments to this day as we speak. And there's nothing my light can do for them because they have to realize what they're doing is absolutely not okay. And that they need to blast their own spiritual light and get out of those habits. And it's really sad. As much as I could sit there and remove things all day long, they just keep coming back because they keep getting invited back. A strange concept and one so what at variance with the conventional is that evolved by the count of Gabbalus concerning the Immaculate Conception, namely that it represents the union of human being with an elemental. Among the offspring of such unions, he lists Hercules, Achilles, Aeneas, Theseus, Melchizedek, the divine Pluto, Apollonius of Tyana, and Merlin the magician. Well, hello, Melchizedek. That was really good. What do you guys think? I'm excited to hear what you think about any of those topics. I just throw in my opinions, what I see, what my thought stream is. You know, I know not everybody's going to be on the same page or in the same thought stream, and that's okay. But I always, you know, wondered as a child, where did all these mythologies and all these fairy tales come from? Are they real, or are they just a made-up imagination? And, you know, as I got older and as I did my research and intuitively went in, they're real for me. Are they real for you? You let me know. Next time, Hermetic Pharmacology, Chemistry, and Therapeutics. Got to be careful on this one. Oops. Got to be careful with that topic. Should be fine. So I hope you guys enjoyed this, The Secret Teachings of All Ages by Manly P. Hall. And don't forget, The Unseen Forces is a little breakdown of a lot of what Manly P. Hall writes about. I'll give you Thought Forms, Emotion Generated Elementals. That's chapter 3, Natural Principles. And he talks about the sylphs, the Undines, the Salamanders, the Gnomes. Basically everything I just read, but there's more depth there. And Children of the Elements. I am literally on the last chapter, Passing of the Dweller. The last is the Sphinx. So I'm on the last chapter. I'm really enjoying this book when I do have the time to focus and like soak in what it's saying. But I think it's really awesome. Whether you like his work or not, I think his work is important. The Curtises stem off of a lot of his concepts, and I don't think they got it from him necessarily. It's just like the analogy I gave with the hourglass the other day. Like a bunch of us are getting this idea and these similar ideas in the thought streams of the ether, and they're being grabbed by us. And unknowingly, other people are already using it or already have without knowing, which is pretty cool. And I think the same thing happened in this time frame where Blavatsky, Hall, and the Curtises were pulling and plucking things off the ether that all of them at the same time frame started writing about. So I think these works are very important. Again, those three clash and hide together as much as the Urantia book, the Awaspe, the Keys of Enoch, the Law of Wine, kind of all channeled work, mesh together with a lot of their sayings and things that they bring to the table. Do I agree with all of it? No. But it's very healthy to pick out and see what each of those books have to say. So with that, guys, sending each and every one of you protection, light, love, and shielding. Please be safe. Have a wonderful rest of your weekend. And I will see you on the next one. Hopefully I don't lose power and I don't have little surges in my power. That was really vicious yesterday. Please be safe, guys. guard your energy. I'll see you on the next one.